अस्सलाम वालेकुम नाज़रीन, सिंध टेलीविजन न्यूज़ जे पारां मां आहियां जो मेज़बान फ़याज़ नाज। हिन वक़्त असां मौजूद आहियूं वाशिंगटन DC जे मिडिल ईस्ट इंस्टीट्यूट में, जिते मिडिल ईस्ट इंस्टीट्यूट जा सीनियर फेलो डॉक्टर मार्विन वाइनबाउम साहब असां सां गॾु आहिनि। डॉक्टर मार्विन वाइनबाउम साहब हिकिड़ा मारूफ़ स्कॉलर आहिनि, थिंक टैंक आहिनि ऐं उहे जेके आहिनि फॉर्मर डिप्लोमेट बि आहिनि। वेलकम सर in my show. Thank you very much for giving us time for this discussion. Actually, as you are aware that 17 years have been passed. Presidency of Bush, then the presidency of Obama and the presidency of Trump. Still the Afghan war is not going to the conclusion. How do you see, is it this great failure of the American foreign policy?
Well, look, it is certainly greatly disappointing results of these efforts over the 17 years. It's hard to pinpoint why things have not gone better, but it doesn't make too much sense for us to dwell on the past and what may have been the mistakes that were made. There's no question that U.S. involvement in Iraq took the attention away from Afghanistan when perhaps actions could have been taken which would have created a stronger, more confident Kabul government. There are domestic issues in Pakistan which have made it much more difficult for this insurgency to be brought under control. But I think that we have to focus on the present and say, where are we now and what can we do? We all can, with hindsight, as I say, see what we might have done differently. But the general objective here, and that is to create a stable, peaceful, yes, if possible, prospering Afghanistan, is still a good objective. And the objective here also to create a an Afghanistan rather, which is politically responsible for its actions, which is accountable for its actions. These are still worthy goals.
So, but as you told that the objective is this, but there are different kind of strategies adopted by the U.S. governments. It was Bush, as you mentioned, that he took away the attention of American troops to the Iraq. Then the Obama came and he was with the policy of surge. And there was a lot of troops in Afghanistan and all that we are going, these troops are deployed to win the war. But unfortunately, that could not happen. Now the Trump came and he said, we are going to defeat Taliban and all those. But still the things are not going on that way.
Yeah.
So don't you think there are still the path or the strategy to achieve those goals Americans are unable to define?
Let me suggest what I think the goal is now. I don't believe that there's a very serious consideration of a military victory. Things have gone too far for that. So what then are the possibilities? One, which is currently being discussed, and that is, well, if we could have a political settlement. And ideally, yes, if you could conclude the war as other civil wars have concluded with political settlements, this should certainly be something we all should strive for. But and let me suggest that the other possibilities here of a military victory, as I say, ruled out. The possibility of a Taliban victory is out there, but that's unlikely to happen in the very near future as long as the international community still is involved in Afghanistan. Should the international forces and most of all the Americans leave, then I would not think that the Afghan government could survive. So it's needed for that survival. But if you want to have a prospering, peaceful accountable, yes, possible democratic government there, the international community is going to have to remain. Now, does it have to remain militarily? Well, that depends. As I say, if you could have a political settlement, this would be the best of outcomes. But it takes two parties, at least two parties, to reach a settlement. And what the two parties must have is an agreement on, at least enough of an agreement, of what the kind of country they would like to see at the end when they have finally agreed, when they have negotiated the terms. And that's the problem that we face today. That there is, I think, an honest effort on the part of not just Pakistan and the United States and the neighbors as well of Afghanistan to try to reach some kind of political outcome. At this point in time, we have to seriously ask, what does the Taliban want? Do they want to have a power-sharing arrangement, which would be normally what happens in a situation like this when there is compromise?
What is your take on that?
Well, what I'm saying is, my feeling is if the Taliban, and let's leave Islamic State out for a moment because they don't want any part of a political solution for as far as we can see. But the suggestion is made that maybe the Taliban would be willing to have a political solution. Then what do they consider to be the end state? My own view here is that this is the sticking point. If the Taliban wanted to have a power-sharing arrangement, I think that could have been negotiated over the last few years. The Kabul government and others are making a push now to make some concessions, to agree to have talks, even initially without the Kabul government because the Taliban don't want to talk to the Kabul government. This would be, we could see the way forward here. There would be a discussion here about under what circumstances, like with Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, even though that hasn't worked out as everybody hoped. Nevertheless, that is the kind of idea that we'll give and you give, and we can reach some kind of agreement where we can have a reconciliation.
But Doctor,
but let me just finish with one thought here. Mm-hmm. But what I am seeing here is that we are overlooking the fact that, and I believe this, that the Taliban will only settle for something which closely resembles the kind of emirate that they lost in the 1990s. And I think that's the great problem now. The Taliban will negotiate. They will negotiate, but they'll negotiate only on their terms. They don't want a system, which certainly has Ashraf Ghani as president. They don't want a system where they are going to be a political party, where they're going to run in elections, where there's going to be a parliament, where there's going to be a constitution, rather than the Sharia, which defines the rules of the game of governance. This is what, until shown otherwise, what they still wish to have. So they will negotiate tomorrow if they could be sure that that's the kind of system that they can have. And they are pragmatic enough to say, okay, we'll talk. We'll talk to the Americans. But we won't talk to the Kabul government because we don't consider them legitimate. Why do they want to talk to the Americans? Because they want they have two goals. One is to get return of prisoners, prisoner swap, and the other is they want to define the terms on which the United States and the others militarily will leave Afghanistan. Obviously, if you have a successful agreement, there's no reason to have foreign forces. But if the foreign forces leave before there is a solid government in place, an agreeable solution, what the Taliban are then saying, we want the people who are keeping you in business to leave, which is effectively saying, we want you to surrender.
But Dr. Marvin, everyone, when talk about Afghan, everyone says that Afghan-led, Afghan-initiated peace initiative. So it means that will be, when we talk about two parties, one party will be Taliban and other party will be the Afghan government. But, but unfortunately, Afghanistan don't have a cohesive government, because Ashraf Ghani has some kind of mindset. There is other partner, power sharing partner, Abdullah. They sometimes in these recent years we have seen both of them not even on the talking terms. If we don't have a cohesive Afghan government, then how can they will be engaging in settlements?
Okay, but you don't know until you start negotiating. You don't know until you make suggestions just how much cohesion there is. Look, most Afghans want to have peace. Overwhelmingly, look, they've been fighting wars since 1978. They want peace. So there certainly is a strong popular support for reaching some kind of a compromise. That's there. There are going to be differences of view on what they can accept, but until you have the results of the negotiation on the table, until you're negotiating, it's hard to know how much unity. Yes, there's disunity, and that's one of the great problems of Afghanistan today, the disunity. But there's also disunity now on the insurgency side. This is not like the 1990s when there was on one side a largely unified Northern Alliance, okay? And there was on the other side a Taliban under the leadership of Mullah Omar. At that point in time, you could put two people together and reach an agreement if it were possible. Actually, the Taliban did not want an agreement with the Northern Alliance. They were offered an agreement. But now with the Taliban is disunified also. And that's why you have Islamic State. These are people who have defected from the Pakistani Taliban, from the Afghan Taliban. So neither side is unified. And you raise an important question, therefore. Is there anything that they agreed to that could be sold to everybody else in their camp? Maybe not. Probably not. And you would have defection.
But if you remember, once Karzai said that Islamic State is being supported by the Americans.
That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous.
But these were the words of Karzai.
I know, but Karzai has broken. Karzai has broken with the U.S. a long time ago. No. You know, this is the kind of conspiracy theory which we have to avoid. We must avoid conspiracy theories. This is very important because, you know, it's the same argument says not only are the Islamic State, but the Taliban are supported by the United States. Because once you buy into that conspiracy theory, then it's all a game. Nothing is serious.
Because last year I also visited Kabul and I met so many politicians, even Abdullah and Rabbani, the foreign minister,
yes.
And the interior minister and the information minister and some leader of the opposition. The opposition leaders were of the view that when the Taliban and the Islamic State fight with each other, the Americans hit the Taliban, not the Islamic State.
No, on the contrary. All of the drone attacks have been against Islamic State. That's just the opposite of what has happened. The drone attacks and most of the effort here has gone against Islamic State and not against the Taliban, because it's the Taliban who are going to negotiate. If you kill the Taliban leaders, you're not going to have any. That was the mistake in killing Mansour. Yes. That was the mistake. because it's people like Mansour are going to have to. So after Mansour was killed, there was no other. That was a one-on. That was a one-time. Whereas over and over again, leaders of Islamic State have been killed. Most of the leadership, in fact, has been taken out. So it's just the reverse of what you're saying.
Now, another point of view. As you were saying that Taliban will demand the same kind of emirates as they have.
I think they'll make some adjustments.
So what kind of adjustment you are expecting, or your analysis says that they will come up to the point?
Well, look, I think that these are minor adjustments. I think they will acknowledge that they made a mistake by not allowing girls to go to school. And that they say now that we'll be more inclusive. That is, we will accept some diversity of views. They're saying that we will not be as stringent as we were before. We will not be as demanding here that people, for example, not can listen to music. You know, they could make these kinds of soft concessions, but they will not concede that you can do without having an emir. And an emir is not elected by the people. An emir is chosen because he is the most pious man among the Taliban.
Will it be possible for US or the current Afghan government to accept that kind of thing?
If you go back to 2001 and the years before, the US never had as its mission to destroy the Taliban. The US wanted one thing: Osama bin Laden. And we repeatedly, and I was in a position in the State Department at the time that I know this, that we did not want regime change. Regime change became necessary because the Taliban would not give up Osama bin Laden. But we were perfectly willing to say, look, that's the government that they want. Okay, now, it wasn't the government that allowed. 1/3 of the people of the country left the country. They didn't want it. And the country was hardly functioning. Under the Taliban, there really was no economy. There were no jobs. I walked around Kabul early in 97. It was a dead city. All of the facilities here, all the services.
But compared to now, it was much safer.
It was perfectly safe.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
It was perfectly safe.
Yes.
Oh yeah, because there was nobody there.
Yes.
You know, you walk on Chicken Street, and,
yes.
and there are 2 shops that are open. It's dead. It's absolutely dead.
But it was safe.
But it was safe. You know, I lived in Kabul in the 1970s, early 1970s. It was safe then too, except for bandits. There'll always be bandits, but it was safe then too. But there was the water, the food, the electricity, all was being supplied by international NGOs and international agencies.
Same is the condition. Still, the economy is supported by the international donors.
Well, yeah, they're keeping certainly the economy going. I agree on that. But there was nobody there was no human capital. Why was it? Not because they didn't have functioning ministries. They had been in Kabul for 5 years, but there still were no functioning ministries. You do have that now, but they can't do without money, and so the administration in Kabul is not in American hands, it's in Afghan hands, but the funds that keep the military going and keep the bureaucracy going, to some extent, not the entire bureaucracy, is thanks to international assistance. Yes, the money, but today you have human capital. You have thousands upon thousands of young, educated people in the country who have made an investment in the country and who want to see it succeed and don't want to live in an emirate. So these are the people who are standing up again and will not accept that kind of outcome.
No, Doctor, I want to ask you about your inside information regarding the talks, direct talks between America and the Taliban in Qatar. What exactly has happened?
I think it's very narrow here. The U.S. wants desperately to see anything which resembles progress. There was no real progress in this round, but maybe it was premature. But it's interesting, you come out of these meetings and the most they accomplish is to say, we'll meet again. That's always the great accomplishment. Well, at least we're going to meet again, even if we didn't reach anything. I don't anticipate that you can have hard bargaining without Kabul. If you think that they're divided, keep them out, and what they see is that the Americans are dealing behind their back. That will not work. Kabul, not just the government, but all of the rest do not want anybody to make these decisions for them. So only on those two issues of prisoner exchange and talk about eventual departure of American forces, on those issues, the Taliban will talk. But that's all. So I don't see, I will not believe that there is progress until you have really substantial negotiations. And to tell you the truth, I don't ever believe that the peace will come to Afghanistan around a large table in Geneva or in Doha or anywhere else. I don't believe it's going to happen that way.
So how that will happen then?
How will peace come? It may come by one side winning and the other side losing. You know, civil wars do end that way, that you have a winner and a loser. But my worry is
so you are talking about the civil war among the Afghans?
No, I'm talking about a civil war. Look, this is very different than the 1990s. In the 1990s, the Kabul government, the Mujahideen government, just simply collapsed everywhere. Everywhere the Taliban went, they didn't have to fight, except once with Massoud.
But now even they don't have the Massoud.
Yeah, Massoud stood up against them once, and then he ran away. So the situation,
line of Panjshir.
Yeah. So he couldn't stop, and it rolled on, but it took 5 years from there. The difference is that then, as the government stepped away, the Taliban took over. It will not happen that way this time. Why? Because of the disunity. Because if the government fails, if the international community walks away, if the government fails, however, and it could even if the international forces stay, what happens if the Kabul government over this election so destroys itself, then there'll be no place for the foreign troops to remain. If the government collapses from within, no, I don't think that's going to happen, but it could. It could happen. So if the government fails now, the Taliban will not succeed. They won't replace them. What you'll have then is a civil war. A civil war which will pit different elements of the Taliban against one another, including Islamic State. Tajiks and Uzbeks and Hazara and Pashtuns will have different militias that will fight one another, and you'll have chaos. That's the kind of civil war that we're looking at if things fall apart. And that's in nobody's interest. It's not in Pakistan's interest. It's not in any of the neighbors. It's nobody's interest. Out of that, who knows what will come. That's what we're facing. And that's why we have to do everything we can to keep Afghanistan, as difficult as it is, as stable as possible, because the alternative to, which is instability, is, I believe, is civil war.
So what do you, as an analyst, what do you foresee? Do you foresee a settlement or a kind of way forward for the peace, or you see that as we have not been succeeded in last 17 years, so things will go to the worst?
Well, the way I see it now is that we'll probably, if nothing else happens, and I'll suggest something that can happen. If nothing else happens, we will just see a continuation of what we have seen. This can go on for another 17 years. Low-level conflicts can go on that way because it's not a great issue. There aren't that many foreign forces there anymore. It could go on this way. However, as I suggest, the Kabul government, if it cannot keep things together, can collapse from within. And then that would be, I think, the end. I don't anticipate that, but the elections are a dangerous time. That's if they replay what they did in 2014, where they could not agree on an outcome, and the U.S. cannot bring them together. It may not be able to do it again. Then the Taliban will have a pathway. So I think that the most likely outcome is that this is going to go on for some time yet. I don't know how long it can go on, but it will go on. The Taliban will make gains in the countryside, but they will not come to control the cities.
Even if the U.S. forces are not there?
No, if the U.S. forces are there, then the game is over. Because then the army will collapse, and all of the fighters will then go back to various militias with their guns, with their know-how. They're fighters now. They'll go back and they'll strengthen these individual militias, which will then be fighting among themselves. That's what's so dangerous about it.
So, Doctor, that means there is no Afghan government, there is U.S. forces versus Taliban.
No, I'm saying, look, if that happens, there's no U.S. forces anymore. If you have civil war, the U.S. forces will not be there. They will, like Vietnam, they will get out. If the government collapses, there's nothing to rest your... Now, let me give you a good scenario where I think it can end in a positive way. If over the next 3-5 years, the Kabul government can bring itself together, if it can solve, after this next election, if it can solve some of its internal problems, and as much as it tears itself apart, no element in the opposition has yet turned against the government. No one has gone to war with the government. And that's important because however much they disagree, they realize that they could go just so far, and if they fight among themselves, then it's all over. So if over the next 3, 5, 7 years, I don't know, asking a long time, the government can do what it lost. It lost the confidence of the people. If it can rebuild the confidence of the people, and it will do so by providing basic security, by providing jobs, by providing a better sense of justice. If it can do those things and also begin to work together politically, then you won't have reconciliation. You won't have a grand bargain where they have a government which has power sharing and all that. As I say, I don't expect that to happen anyway. You won't have that, but what you'll have is something called reintegration. And that is where a successful government, and this has happened elsewhere, and it has happened on a very small scale, where the government is able to pull apart the insurgency. It's able to strike deals with individual commanders. It's able to get the commanders to bring his forces over, because they're not fighting ideologically, most of them. They have grievances. They have against the government. But if the government can regain, so what is the international force doing right there and right now? It's not there to win. It's there to buy time. It's buying time in the hope that they can do what I've just said and that they can ultimately prevail because they have regained the confidence of the people. The confidence that they had from 2001 until 2005 or 6, for example.
But doctor, this is the will and wish of so many people, including all the peace-loving people who want, but that can happen when they have strong state institutions, they have a strong government, they have a strong military to provide security, they have a strong police force to provide control the crime, they have a strong justice system, but unfortunately we don't see any kind of thing in this. Let us move forward.
Just one further last thought on that. Okay. No, they don't have that now. And that's why you can't have reintegration. But if they did, then I think that's the way forward. But unless you have those conditions for reintegration, you can't succeed.
Now, Doctor, Pakistan has been ally of the United States in the days of Cold War, CENTO, CETO, and then the Reagan and Zia.
And the jihad.
Yes. Reagan and Zia means jihad.
Yeah.
And then after 9/11, Bush and Musharraf, Bush and Bush both were again. Yes. But throughout these periods of cooperation and alignment of decades, there is always trust deficit between those two countries. Still, the things are not.
No. Okay, look, it's not just trust. I think what we have failed to realize on both sides is that we have some things in common, where we have common objectives, and other things we're going to differ. We're going to differ over Indian policy towards India to some extent. We're going to differ on our priorities, what we think is more important and what we think is less important. As I said before, we don't have a good understanding of why Pakistan has held on to the Afghan insurgents. We do have some things in common, though. I think both sides want to be able to deal with terrorism. Both sides need to deal with terrorism. Pakistan has a terrorism problem. The United States sees terrorism as a major issue. We have many things on which we can agree. We could, for example, with Pakistan, we can agree that a political settlement in Afghanistan would be good. It would be good for both countries. Both countries would find a way out. We could agree on that, but
Dr.
we have to realize...
I have a supplementary question, because these are the things which people like you or the diplomats, or they always say, we have these common grounds to work together. But unfortunately, when the governments or the policy makers, they always have a kind of complaints with each other. You are not doing this, you are not doing this, you are not doing this, you are not doing this. So do more for this, and they say do more for this, you are doing this. This is what, because these things are very common. Since years we have been talking that both the countries have some common objectives, some common goals, some common fields to work together. But unfortunately, throughout these periods, Afghanistan's war, if we look on in this specific context, the Americans, Trump says, we have given them billions of dollars, but they have betrayed us. They have
right.
This is what the governments say. And this is not now, this is not a new phenomenon, because if you remember, this phenomena has been happening for the decades. Ayub, even in the days of Ayub wrote, friends, not masters.
Yes.
He said, we have been dictated by the US, so we don't want dictations. And Zia says, you are giving us peanuts and getting us such a big... Musharraf says that I got a call, and that was a threatening call.
It was, yes, you were for us or against us. It was.
This is what, because this is what is between the policy makers. When we look in the context of the governments, the things are not so easy as we talk on the tables.
No, I understand that. I understand the frustrations here with that. But at the same time, Pakistan has also been not necessarily truthful with the United States. And this is the way it's viewed here, that Pakistan, and you hear this term, double game. Okay, so this, Pakistan has, has different objectives, and but the fact is that the United States remains important for Pakistan. Pakistan cannot really expect to prosper if it breaks its ties. So what I'm getting at here is neither the United States nor Pakistan can afford to divorce one another. They still need one another. They need one another maybe for limited purposes. And they need to understand, yes, that the way, and I agree here, the way in which you get another country to do something is not to disrespect them, is not to...
So you agree that the U.S. government...
I think some of the things that have been said are very disrespectful, yes, particularly recently. Particularly recently, yes. I think they are. I think that you have to understand that every country, including the United States, values its sovereignty, its honor, and this has to be appreciated. And sometimes it has not been. I agree. And I think that I'm not defending American foreign policy in every sense, but I'm saying at the end of the day, we still need one another. The U.S. cannot visualize any kind of successful operations, obviously, in Afghanistan without Pakistan. And Pakistan has, after all, gotten how many billions of dollars? Next to Israel, it is the second largest recipient of assistance from any country in the world. It has gotten something in them. And at the same time, its links with the United States have also, if it did not have these links with the United States, I think Indian policy would be different. And I understand the fear now of the U.S. tilting so strongly towards India.
But you will be aware that the current Prime Minister Imran Khan have been saying since years that this was not our war. This was Americans' war.
That's been his motto.
Yes. Yeah. He has been saying that. This was American war, and we fought for the Americans, and we sacrificed our lives, we sacrificed our economy, we sacrificed our peace, we sacrificed all for the American interest, because it was not our interest to fight to go for the fight into the Afghanistan. This is his stated position.
Right. But Pakistan had a role in making it America's problem. Remember, it was Pakistan that supported the Taliban during the 1990s. It was Pakistan's military...
No, you are talking about the 90s.
Yeah, I'm saying,
but they created... The 80s.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the 80s, when we went there.
In the 80s?
Yes.
Okay, now you go back to the jihad. Yes, that was Soviet invasion in 1979. Pakistan was enlisted in that. The U.S. did not. What the U.S. did was in the 1980s was it gave lump sums of money to Pakistan.
For what?
And said
for what?
Well, for what?
Because
to support the Islamic parties of Afghanistan, which for Pakistan were going to be Pakistan's way of creating what was then called strategic depth. So Pakistan had goals there too. Pakistan wanted to make sure that India would not play a role in Afghanistan. The way to do it was to create friendly government. And the way to create a friendly government was to put these Islamic parties, all 7 Islamic parties, in. They became the Mujahideen. They were the ones that were cultivated by Pakistan. They were the ones sent in. The U.S. had it only provided, Saudi Arabia and the United States provided the money, but this was Pakistan's conflict. It orchestrated the jihad with obviously American, this assistance was important.
That means, doctor, that though in Pakistan that was not a legitimate government, there's a dictatorship of Zia.
That may be,
yes,
but it was your government.
Yes,
it was your
fighting
government.
with the people of Pakistan too, because at that time there was a Mahdi movement for the restoration of democracy, and that government, the Zia dictatorship, was fighting with the people of Pakistan.
But it wasn't just dictatorship. You had a military also, which was under his command.
I want to make a point here.
Yeah.
I want to understand. It means that when we talk about the non-state actors which are destroying the peace, right. So it means it was the American government and the Saudi government who funded to create those non-state actors in that region. Is it true?
What they created then was a Islamic-oriented force.
Non-state actors. They were non-state actors.
No. They were non-state. The Mujahideen parties were non-state actors. There were 7 of them. They were all Islamic parties. There were nationalistic parties which Pakistan refused to recognize. Refused to recognize them. They created these parties for the purpose here. Now the U.S. had sold Pakistan the argument that you had to do this to protect Pakistan. It's being overrun by the Soviets. That was false. That was false. But once Pakistan had gotten involved in it, Pakistan decided it was going to make sure that the next government in Afghanistan would be one that would be controllable from Pakistan. And that was how the money was used. They didn't get that because once Rabbani, the elder Rabbani,
yes.
got in there, he started to deal with India.
The President Rabbani.
Yes, President Rabbani. He started to deal with India. So he turned his back on Pakistan. So it's always more complicated than we first.
Okay, let us move forward. What is the current situation? Because Foreign Minister of Pakistan came here and he met with here in the State Department with Mike Pompeo, and he also met with the National Security Advisor. They have also meetings in New York too. What is the current situation? Because still Americans say that the IMF bailout package, they have an eye on it. What does that mean?
Well, I think that there's going to be an IMF package because the new government has inherited an economy which is clearly in crisis. And it means that the new government is going to be focused very much on domestic affairs, which means that foreign affairs will remain very much outside of the government's reach. This will be the military's, as it has been. And so right now the United States has to deal with both, as it has in the past, both the military and the civilian government. What we don't know now here is, well, let me say, I don't think, therefore, there's going to be any foreign policy crisis with the United States, because the area in which there could be conflict would be Afghanistan. And I think now we're going to see that whatever Imran Khan's views are on this, he's going to suppress those views. He's going to be, as I say, focused just on domestic things. So we'll see now that the military...
But American expectations about the cooperation of Pakistan to bring all the forces of all the Taliban groups on the table, and...
That's unrealistic. Pakistan does not have that kind of influence. Pakistan can be a spoiler. It has spoiler influence. That is, Pakistan, if it wants, can keep things from happening. But Pakistan cannot make things happen. It cannot dictate to the Taliban. No, it's never been the case. It may be able even to bring them to the table, but it can't make them compromise. That goes all the way back to the 1990s. Every time they tried to get the Taliban to do something the Taliban didn't want to do.
Then what are the expectations of the U.S. government?
Well, I think that the U.S. government is wrong in believing that Pakistan is the key to peace. Pakistan can be one of the keys, but it is not the key to peace. I think that's much more complicated. Again, I keep repeating that it's always more complicated. And until we understand all the pieces and how they interact, we don't really understand. The great danger is that we come up with simple explanations for things when they're much more complex and they have to be examined much more carefully. So, this is why conspiracy theories have always been so difficult for me to understand, because conspiracy theories always have a simple explanation for everything.
So then how you will elaborate the Pak-US relations in this specific condition when you see that Pakistan is a spoiler, not a...
No, at the moment it's not being a spoiler. It can be a spoiler. It has been a spoiler in the past. It has been, when it saw that its interests were not being, and if it meant arresting Taliban leaders, they were willing to do it. Of course, they felt that those Taliban leaders were breaking from Pakistan. They were not, Pakistan could not trust them. But I do think that Pakistan wants to see, if it can, a peaceful outcome in Afghanistan, if it can be assured that that kind of peace is not going to be against Pakistan's interest. And what's high on that list is that whatever government comes in there, it's not going to be dependent on India.
What is your information, or what is your take on that? Is there any development between the authorities, American and Pakistan authorities, on this specific situation? Any agreement or any...
No. I think right now we're in a kind of holding pattern, a pause. And unless there's some incident which blows things up, I think we're just going to see a steady state in the relationship for some time. Pakistan is focused domestically. The United States has other problems. And Pakistan is not high on the agenda of American foreign policy at this point.
But Afghanistan is the agenda. And when we talk about Afghanistan...
that will just continue, if allowed to, it will just continue. The United States is much more focused on Iran. It's much more focused on Syria. It's much more focused on the Gulf and Saudi Arabia. And this is why there will be no really additional initiatives from the United States.
Before talking with you, I'll be very happy to talk on the Iran, Gulf, and Saudi Arabia, and the Middle East, and the Syria. But one last question about this.
Please, because I have to.
Yes. Because last question about that how do you see the role of China? Because they have also engagements in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, they have also engagements. Now, the Pakistan, they have a CPEC, huge infrastructure project.
Right, and China, obviously...
And that's what Pompeo says, that we will keep our eye on the IMF because this money should not be paid to China. So,
well, I think we would just simply, that if they come across with 8 billion or 12 billion, whatever the figure is going to be, that because Pakistan has debt payments coming due next month, that money is invested in strengthening the economy and it's not simply siphoned off by debt payment. How you can separate these out, I don't know, because it's fungible. It's hard to know where money is going where. If it's not spending here, we spend here. So this is a concern that at the moment Pakistan, and in the future, is heavily indebted to China. But I think Pakistan wisely is now looking much more carefully at its agreements with China, and to make sure that it's got the best deal that it can get, and that it is not overextending itself any more than it has to in terms of debt repayment. Because, look, China has invested in Pakistan, yes, to help Pakistan, but to help China. And when the United States gives assistance to Pakistan, it also profits. This is the only way you can sell it domestically.
Now Saudi Arabia has decided to be the part of CPEC.
Well, you know, everybody, if there's something in it for them, what that means, it's hard to see where they fit in. But yes, Afghanistan wants to be part of it, Iran wants to be part of it. Everybody wants to, if there's something in it for them, they want to be part of it. But what that means in concrete terms, what exactly is involved, that's another issue.
Do you see any role of China and Russia in a peacemaking process in Afghanistan?
Then again, I think that they can be spoilers. I don't think they can make peace. Both of them have, Iran and Russia have hedging strategies where they want to keep their lines open to the Taliban. They want to be sure that Islamic State does not emerge stronger, because Islamic State has ambitions for spreading revolution or insurgency into Central Asia, into Iran. So China will not play a large role in this. China would like to see stabilization because it has its investment in Pakistan. A stable Pakistan is necessary. A peaceful Pakistan is necessary for Chinese investment to pay off. No, I think the neighbors are important to make a peace last, to assure peace. They cannot dictate any more than Pakistan can. They cannot dictate an outcome here. This war will take will have its own momentum, its own course, and they can influence it, but only at the edges. It centrally is going to be up to what the Taliban are willing to settle for, and I think you've heard me say what I think they want, what the government is in the position to agree to, and they can agree to so much but not everything, and the U.S. will remain there again, buying time, in the hope that somehow something will happen, that there'll suddenly be a peace will break out, or that the neighbors will step in. But these shortcuts will not bring peace.
Dr. Marvin Weinbaum, thank you very much. But I really wanted to talk about the Middle East, of Iran and
Syria.
But I will request you to give me time, any time you have, because I am here for a few days and I really want to talk.
Yeah,
take on that.
This week is going to be really tough.
Nobody's.
But you'll go to this conference.
Yes.
This is going to be an excellent conference.
Yes.
It has all of the people in town who you should get to know.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So nice of you. नाज़रीन, डॉक्टर मार्विन वाइनबाम सां तव्हां असांजी गुफ़्तगू ॿुधी त इन सां गॾु प्रोग्राम जो वक़्तु पूरो थिए थो। पंहिंजो मेज़बान फयाज़ नाश की इजाज़त सदाईं गॾु।